everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out in the shop with another great video for you today. And in today's shop, man, I'm giving up the goods on a technique, on a method for catching bass that people have not wanted to talk about for a lot of years. This is, when you talk about kind of like hush-hush secret, guys not wanting to let the cat out of the bag, this is one of them. And in today's shop, we're going to be talking about skipping a buzzbait. How to fish a buzzbait under stuff and really present a lure that never gets fished in those areas to these bass, and they go crazy. They go crazy, okay? You know, the power of a buzzbait, if you've ever fished a buzzbait, you know that sound, right? That gurgling, chopping sound, and a lot of times accompanied by a squeak and a flash, really draws bass to that lure from a long ways away, right? You know, that sound really mimics natural forage. It can mimic a bluegill, a bait fish trying to get away, an actual like frog or little bird or something, you know, on top. Really creates a impulse reaction strike to these fish, right? So it draws them to the bait. It's a sound and a movement that draws them to it, and then they really want to kill it. Like, I can remember some of the best bites of my life on top have happened with the buzzbait. But traditionally with a buzzbait, we're really limited to fishing on the edge of stuff, right? You know, think about it. Normal 3/8, half-ounce buzzbait, whether you're using a skirt or a toad, we're getting it and we're casting parallel to the edge of a dock. We're getting it and we're on an undercut bank and we're casting parallel to the undercut bank, right? You know, a tree, big giant pine tree that's fallen off the bank, we get that buzzbait, we fish to the left of that tree, and we fish to the right of that tree, and we keep going. Imagine if you could take that buzzbait, the drawing power, the reactionary strike power of a buzzbait, and we can go under the cover. We could go underneath of that boat dock, skip it under a pontoon boat, under overhanging trees and limbs, that undercut bank that only ever sees wacky rig Senkos. Now, on top. Imagine if you could do that. Well, guess what? You can. So we're going to talk about how to skip a buzzbait. I'm going to go over the kind of buzzbait you need. I'm going to talk about the modification you want to make with this thing to get it to skip. And then we're going to talk about the options with how to skip it with rods and reels, okay? But let's start with the buzzbait, okay? For this technique, for skipping buzzbaits, we're not going to use our traditional big buzzbaits, okay? So 3/8, half-ounce, 5/8, those normal buzzbait sizes you're using, leave them in the boat. That's for normal buzzbait fishing. For skipping a buzzbait, guys, we're going to use small, compact buzzbaits. And from a size perspective, we're going to use 1/4 ounce buzzbaits or smaller, okay? 1/4 ounce or smaller. I really am a fan of the 1/4 ounce Molix Lover Mini Buzz, okay? I'm going to pull one out in a second. I'm going to show you why, but this is a 1/4 ounce buzzbait, but look how little it is. It's small. It's actually got an 1/8 ounce frame, but it weighs 1/4 ounce. But there's a lot of other buzzbaits out there, just generic buzzbaits that are little and small. This one's an 1/8 ounce, little tiny bait, okay? So we need that smaller frame, right? We need that smaller profile to make this skipping possible, okay? So no big buzzbaits, 3/8, half-ounce that you're normally throwing. We're getting rid of those, and we're going to these smaller ones, okay? 1/4 ounce, 3/16, 1/8 ounce, perfect. All right, you heard me mention that Molix Lover Mini Buzz SS. And you can see that there's an 1/8 ounce, there's a 1/4, and they're about the same size. So I like that one because it's a little heavier, gives me a little more momentum. You're going to hear this as we start to talk about the cast. But the other thing I love about the Molix is it's more of an inline buzzbait, okay? Let me see if I can just show you what I'm talking about there. If you look at the wire has a little jog down, but pretty much it's inline, okay? It's more flat. When you look at a traditional buzzbait, you have more of that safety pin design, right? That more of that N-shaped wire, and it's a little less inline, okay? The great thing about this Molix is that because it's inline, it's flatter, and it's going to help with that skip, okay? But regardless, small buzzbait, 1/4 ounce or less. But we're going to take these buzzbaits and we're going to modify these lures to create a skipping buzzbait. Okay? We'll start on the Molix. The skirts are hand tied, so we're literally just going to pull the skirt off. Okay? So I get them between my fingers. I just grab all that silicone material off of there, and when we pull that off, we're just left with the head and the little keepers. You're going to see that's important too, okay? On a traditional buzzbait, this is that little 1/8 ouncer, more of that safety pin design. This has just the rubber bandit skirt on it, so we're going to get that skirt. Just pull it off. You can even save it for later if you want, okay? So we're going to take our little buzzbaits and we're going to get rid of the skirt, okay? All right. Here's the magic, guys. This is what's going to make this buzzbait skip, okay? Is we're going to add a plastic lure in place of the skirt that is going to aid with the ability to get it under stuff by skipping. And I've really, over the years, played with some different style plastics, but hands down, this is the shape that I use when I'm skipping. And I'm going to use a tube jig, the good old plastic tube jig, and I'm going to add this tube to that buzzbait to make it skip. I use a lot of them, honestly, depending on the size of the buzzbait. A 3 to 4 inch tube is perfect. Berkley, this is the Berkley power tube, got 3 different sizes here, and you know, like a lot of tubes, if you look at it, we've got a die-cut skirt, right? It's just cut all sorts of ways. So we're going to have that same skirt flare as we reel it, and I want that. And then, of course, these tubes are hollow. These are hollow-bodied tubes. You're going to see that's real important to how we add this tube. And the other great thing about a tube is, especially this Berkley power tube, when you look at it, even though it's round, it's kind of more flat, right? It's compact and it's flat. And so when we add this to this buzzbait, we're going to maintain action, just like a skirt, right? The back of that. But that flat surface, that little rounded head, you're going to see as we put it on there, is going to provide the means for skipping that thing way up under docks and not impeding it, right? If we were using a regular skirt or we were using a horny toad or a frog, the skirt's got big appendages, the frog has arms, it wants to stop the skipping motion. Because that's so flat and subtle, it's going to help in the skipping motion, okay? So here we go, guys. We're going to add that tube to that buzzbait, and we're going to create a lure that skips like a dream, okay? Before we add it, the one other thing I did want to mention is that we're going to use super glue as a big part of this, because the super glue is going to help that tube stay on that little buzzbait, and it's also going to help bond the top where we make that hole to the head of the buzzbait, okay? So spike it glue, a Gorilla Glue, regular old school super glue, whatever you want to use is fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is, before I put the skirt on, I'm just going to add a little dab right to the body of that, right at the base of the head. And that's going to help that bait adhere and stay on that hook, okay? So we're going to get it. And literally, guys, I'm going to take that hook, I'm going to enter the top of the tube and just thread it. Simply threading that tube on, okay? As that tube starts to go up, it's going to bend, and I want to push it out at the very bottom of the solid body of that tube. So literally right before the skirt starts, as far low as I can get it, I want to pop that hook out. I'm going to continue all the way up, and when I get to the head, remember, you can't do this with a lot of other soft plastics, but because the tube is hollow, watch this, ready? It's going to pop right over the head, and then I'm going to pull it back, okay? I mean, look at that. Talk about a clean presentation, right? That tube literally molded right over that head. That's the Molix. We can do it same thing with a safety pin design. And last but not least, because I pushed that head over the tube, or pushed the tube over the head, I'm going to use that same super glue, and you're going to see just a mark where that tube went over the head. And I'm just going to bond that, okay? So then I put one little drop just right on the head of that tube. Now I've bonded it on there. I'm going to let it dry a little bit. And guys, that tube is on there. On there, on there. We're going to be able to skip it. We're going to be able to catch 4 or 5 fish. And it's not going to tear off really easily, okay? It's going to stay on there. All right. Last but not least, before we get into how to fish it, I wanted to mention a trailer hook. When to use a trailer hook and when not to use it. If I can get away with not using the trailer hook, I don't use it. I'm going to give you a percentage. About 70% of the time when I'm skipping these little buzz baits, 1/4 ounce, 3/16 ounce, 1/8 ounce, I'm not using a trailer hook. About 70% of the time. Because that trailer hook is not only another thing that gets snagged under that cover. Remember, you're skipping it, you don't know what's under there. You're going to, literally, it's going to go, and it's going to go back into the darkest places. You don't know what's under there. So if I can get away without a trailer hook, I'm getting snagged less, it's skipping easier. But about 30% of the time, if the water is extremely clear, if they're slapping at the bait, if you're getting bites and missing them, I'm going to add a trailer hook. But I add a very small trailer hook when I'm skipping, right? The buzzbait's small, and I don't want a big hook catching the water as it's skipping. So a number 1 or a 1/0 trailer hook, 30% of the time, if they're missing it, if the water's clean, but I really try to fish it without a trailer hook, okay? And look, just in that short time, that little dot of glue that we put on the head already bonded it on there. Look at that thing. That's not going anywhere. I'm pulling on it pretty good, okay? All right, so now we're going to talk about what I want to do with this bait. Once again, nobody's talking about it because it's so effective. The reason it's so effective is they never see that under stuff. They never hear. They never see that splash. It's a presentation that the fish don't see, right? How many Senkos, wacky rig stick baits, flukes, do you think they see under that stuff? A million! But a topwater lure, a buzzbait, that sound, that gurgle, that splash, hardly ever, okay? So basically, we're going to skip this bait under those places, and as soon as that bait, the momentum of that bait stops, you ready? We're going to reel. We're just going to reel. We're really going to let that blade, and again, this is the Molix, but listen, you're going to hear even a little squeak. Ready? Hear that little high-pitched squeak, right? So we're just going to reel that bait. The one thing I do like to do is as I reel it, every once in a while, I'll just give my rod a little tip, like just a small little jerk. And so it throws that blade off just a little bit, and a lot of time it ignites the strike. So I'm skipping under. As soon as the momentum stops, I'm clicking over, and I'm beginning my retrieve. I want that lure on the top. About every 3 cranks. And then eventually that buzzbait's going to come out of that cover, whatever it is, under the pontoon, under the dock, the overhang, the tree. And once it gets back to my rod tip, I do it again. And I make the next cast over and over again. A lot of times, even on a small area like a dock or a pontoon, I like to make that cast 3 or 4 times, change up the angle a little bit to really give those fish an opportunity to bite it, okay? So skipping it, reeling it, keeping on top. I want to go into tackle because if you're watching this and you only fish spinning, or if you're watching this and you only fish a bait caster, here's the good news, guys. You can do it with both, okay? So I'm going to give you both ways to do it. 100%! You can skip these little buzzbaits with a bait caster. If you already skip a swim jig under docks and pontoons, if you already skip a regular jig under overhanging trees and undercut banks, it's the same thing. It really is the same. Rod and reel wise, I like a 7-foot medium action rod. I like that little bit of tip to build up some momentum. So 7-foot medium action casting rod. And then on the reel, fast gear ratio reel, okay? 7:1 or greater. This is a Xenon, which is actually, this is the 8:3:1. Because when you skip it, and I'm going to show you in a second the cast, the little sidearm check swing. But when you skip it, that bait has momentum. And as soon as that momentum stops, we need to click and start reeling, right? We need instant recovery of that bait to keep it high. So 7-foot medium action casting rod, fast gear ratio casting reel. And last but not least on line, guys, are you ready for this? Mono. Monofilament. It's one of the situations where mono gets the nod. And the reason I'm using mono on skipping these little buzzbaits is because mono floats. Mono is going to help us keep that buzzbait on the top a lot easier. So generally, guys, I'm using 14 to 20 pound mono. I really like 15 or 17. Great size of mono to skip under cover and get the fish out. And it lets the bait ride high, okay? Casting technique, skipping a buzzbait. These little tiny custom rigged buzzbaits, no different than skipping a jig or a swim jig or something like that. And we're really going to use sort of this sidearm check swing. And you can do it 2 ways with a casting rod. You know, the one basically is where that lure is going to be up near the tip. And when we cast, we're going to sort of roll that lure. And when we cast, we're not casting up like a long cast, but we're coming to the side. We're keeping our rod parallel to the water. And we're just going to, just like in baseball, we're just going to do a check swing, right? It's like, and when we hit that point to where the lure starts to get momentum, we're going to take our finger off the spool. And the weight of that lure, 1/4, 3/16, 1/8, with that tube, because it's so flat, it's going to, and then we can get it out of there, okay? Of course, the other way to skip a buzzbait, and sometimes in their close quarters, this is a good way too, is more of the traditional jig skipping technique, which is where I'm going to grab the buzzbait, and if I'm close quarters, I can do a traditional pitch skip, right? Which is like a pitch, but I'm kind of doing it more to the side, and I still want to get that momentum to the bait. So it's in front, I hit it, I stop. As soon as the lure hits forward momentum, I give it a little push, take my finger off the spool, and that's really going to let that thing fly, okay? So casting equipment, definitely we can do it. But spinning equipment, guys, it's just as good. And if you're using especially the real little ones, If you're using a buzzbait that's 1/8 of an ounce, sometimes using a casting rod can be a little bit of a challenge. So this technique, buzzbait skipping, is also good when you're using it with a spinning rod, okay? And you know, same thing with the spinning rod. It's literally the same action. I like a 7-foot medium rod. I don't want the spinning rod to be too long because I'm making these little check swing casts, right? So 7-foot medium spinning rod. Reel, something fast. Actually, I use, this is just the regular Revo S, but I use the Revo Rocket a lot. And the Revo Rocket spinning reel is 7:6 to 1. So super fast gear ratio. So something in the higher gear ratio. And then last but not least, when I'm fishing these little buzzbaits, skipping these buzzbaits on a spinning rod, I use braid. I use braid tied directly to the lure. No leader, straight braid. A lot of times I'm using, that's that 10 or 12 pound Berkley X5 braid. And just like mono, braid floats. Braid is very buoyant. So I make that skip, same kind of cast, right? The check swing. I've got the buzzbait. I start that sidearm cast parallel to the water. When I get that forward momentum, I stop and give it a little snap, just like in baseball, right? Just like a check swing. So parallel to the water, snap. Gets the momentum. Because that tube is on there, it skips, and as soon as the forward momentum stops, I start reeling. Every 3 or 4 cranks, give it a little pop until it's out of that cover, okay? So spinning rod, just as good for this technique. Watercolor, caught them in clean, caught them in dirty. Times of the year, caught them in the spring, killed them in the summer, have murdered them in the fall. Winter, probably the one time of the year where it's not as effective because they're, for the most part, a little deeper, a little less active. But spring, summer, fall, different water clarities, different conditions, rivers, streams, reservoirs, lakes, ponds. The main thing with this technique, and again, really, really a big secret, is that it's a presentation, it's a sound, it's an action, it's a noise that the fish don't see. Fish living under stuff never see a buzzbait. Modify that little thing, and you're going to get bites that you never even knew existed. It's that good. Guys, I hope you're enjoying these shop videos. If you like what you're seeing, if you like what you're hearing, stop right now and hit that subscribe button. You got to subscribe because when you subscribe, we're going to send you notifications when a new video drops, and that's every single week. If you're already subscribed, tell your friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. We're here to help you hopefully become a better angler and catch more fish. Give that a try. Skipping a buzzbait, use that tube. You're going to get some big bites. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli out in the shop. Thanks for watching. And if you like this video, you have to check out that one, and I hope you like them.